Hello, my friends. Another video for you guys. I feel inspired again. Actually, I got this big old list of videos that I want to just go through, so I'm cranking them out left and right whenever I get a chance to sit down and get this big old light shining on my face. Hope everyone is doing good today. It's another beautiful day. It's raining. One of these days, I'm gonna get outside and get in nature because it's so gosh darn beautiful outside, and I don't want to be sitting behind this desk. So maybe one of my friends will let me borrow one of his camera holder things. Anyway, so what are we talking about today? This is a very important one, and this is one that goes over a lot of people's heads in their lives because they don't recognize the significance and the importance of it. But it's probably one of the most important things you can do in your life because whether you know it or not, this is sort of what you're doing anyway in your life. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about shadow work. Shadow work. And so what do I mean by you're doing this anyway in your life? Well, I first have to give the context of what the shadow is. So according to Carl Jung, who is probably one of the most brilliant psychological thinkers of forever, he talks about these layers of consciousness within our mind that exist on any given basis. And actually, later I'll probably go over these different layers and levels of consciousness because understanding each one of their respective layers within our own mind gives tremendous insight to how we view the world and the lenses in which we look at the world. But the shadow is probably one of the most important things to deal with because what the shadow is it's everything that we have experienced in our lives that we have rejected. And this could be through it's primarily done through our cultural conditioning, could be done through some kind of religion, could be done through really anything. It's what we have come to understand as we're growing up in our lives as things that are bad, that we have rejected. So these can be anything from violence. We typically don't want to be violent. Really anything. It's essentially anything that you have thrown away in a drawer of your mind and don't want to look at and don't want to address. Now, some of the things that we put into our shadow mind are good. Like we typically don't want to go around and kill people, right? And the idea of just thinking about killing people all the time is probably not going to be good for your conscience and it's not going to be good for your psyche. But there are some things that we have thrown into our shadow that scare us, and if they're not addressed in life, they could really be damaging and really hinder us from actualizing very high levels of actualization within our lives. And the shadow can really be anything. It can be fear of rejection. It can be trauma that we haven't integrated properly. It can be fear of it can be damages that we've had from relationships with our parents, sexual trauma. Really anything. But primarily, most of the time, the things that go into our shadow side are things that cause trauma in our lives or have been instigated from trauma that has occurred in our lives. And that's the reason why we typically don't want to look at it because it's traumatic, right? So the reason why I say that we're doing this anyway in our lives is that no matter where you go, this shadow aspect of you still follows you around no matter where you go. You can't leave yourself. You can't leave your mind. Like when you wake up in the morning, you're still dealing with yourself. So this is why trends and patterns that consistently happen in your life. It's because although your environment does play a big role in it, what ultimately is continuing to manifest in your life, the reason why things continue to manifest in your life is because this ultimately resides in your mind, more specifically in your shadow that you haven't integrated. So what is shadow work? Shadow work is essentially bringing to light what is residing in your shadow. And it's immensely important to try to bring to light the things that are within your shadow. And by meditating and writing them down, you can sort of take your understanding of the things that are bothering you, the things that are holding you back, and bring it to the forefront, and then be able to compartmentalize it and be like, okay, this is what is bothering me. This is one thing that is really hindering me from growing. This is another thing that's hindering me from growing. This is another thing that's hindering me from growing. Now, typically the way that you can uncover the things about your shadow side are the things that you feel very uncomfortable talking about. If somebody brings up a topic of conversation and immediately you feel like a twisting in your stomach, that is an immediate indicator of something that's probably residing within your shadow side. Other things that you reside within your shadow side, if you have a consistent nightmare of something that goes on over and over again, and there's a theme to that nightmare, that could be indicative of something that's residing within your shadow side. If there's things that really make you angry, that's something that could be residing in your shadow side. If there's things that make you really sad, that's something that's generally within your shadow side. So really any type of negative emotions that are polarizing to a negative polarity, sadness, anger, fear, definitely fear, are all things that are indicative of something within your shadow side. And so I'll give you a really good example for myself. For a long time, I was very afraid of the idea of selling. And I don't know why. Maybe because I had some concept of that selling you had to be some scummy guy, you had to be pushy to be a good salesman, you had to sort of polarize yourself, you needed to be like this good cop, bad cop kind of guy. And it was really only until I had forced myself into becoming okay with that idea of selling, and that is really not even anything that's bad, and sales are necessary to facilitate commerce throughout the world. It's a very important skill to learn. And only until I was really able to say, this is what I'm afraid of, and put myself in that situation, and put myself in that fear, and really articulate that this is what was making me afraid, only then was I able to overcome that fear of that shadow. But you first have to be okay with bringing to light the things that you are afraid of. And actually, I have my little book of intentions and things that I want to be able to overcome in my life or be able to see in my life. And I have right here a list of all the shadow aspects. Fear of rejection. I think I talked about this in one of my other videos of breaking life patterns. This has a lot to do with your shadow work, and that had to do with understanding the importance of when to establish boundaries and knowing when to say no and knowing when to say yes, right? So that is very important, and that's a really, really big step to knowing what your shadow side is by writing it down and articulating, saying, this is my shadow, this is what I need to work on. And of course, you can keep it private. You don't have to go announcing it to everybody. I just feel I'm being transparent with you guys about some of the things that I have struggled with in my life. So now what do you need to do? Now that you've written it down and you're starting to observe the things in your life that you're really struggling with, how do you know that you are making progress in your life? Well, what you should do, and a lot of this has to do with subconscious and how your subconscious works, and we're going to make a lot of videos on the subconscious in the future. But what is really immensely beneficial to you is making measurable results. So when you're exercising, for example, like the amount of abdominal muscles that you have is a measurable physical result, or the amount of body mass you have is a measurable physical result, or if you're studying for school, your grades are a measurable result. So the idea is taking something that's abstract, taking something that is such as the idea of rejection, like it's a very abstract idea, and making it more concrete. So the way that you would do that is you would write out a specific scenario in your life and visualize that scenario in your life of when you know definitively that you have overcome this shadow aspect. So for example, I'm going to use the idea of selling, for example. So if I were to write down an idea, I would say, I have overcome, you can write something literally like this in your little book, which I recommend writing down everything, all your thoughts that you have. It's super important. And maybe I can get into the science of why that's important later and how that works with your neural networks. But that's a different story. But so when you write down that scenario in your mind, you could say, I know that I have overcome this shadow aspect because I have seen myself be okay with rejection. I am fearless when I am rejected from a sale. I feel comfortable talking about a product or service that I want to sell. I know that I feel worthy of promoting this product or service because I know it provides value. So they are tangible things that you can write down, that you can observe in your physical reality to be indicators that you are actually working on your shadow side. So for example, going on with that stream of thought, I mean, you can have it be super dead honest. You can have somebody be like, I know that, you can have somebody say something like, wow, I feel very comfortable talking to you about your products or services. You don't feel pushy to me. You feel genuine. You feel like you care, right? So that can be a very direct, succinct verbal indicator that you are overcoming your shadow side of the fear of rejection or selling, because somebody's actually telling you that they feel comfortable about you talking with them about that product or service, as opposed to your fear of them just getting annoyed by you or being rejected by you, right? So that's something that you could really write down as, I want to hear a specific thing, or people specifically tell me these things, and then therefore these are indicators of some progress that I've made. So another example is, I have a friend of mine in town. If you're watching this video, you know who you are. I don't mean to call you out. But so this person really struggles with the idea of being too much of a perfectionist when it comes to making his music. So I said, well, maybe something you can do is, when you feel this is coming up, maybe you can envision yourself allowing that thought of perfectionism to pass by and say, it's okay, and you still feel very happy with the result that you have made within your software. So if you make a riff, you immediately feel super invigorated or excited about the way that riff sounds, or the way that melody sounds, and you become more connected to that idea of the feeling good about loving that melody or loving that riff, as opposed to feeling that pull of that desire for perfection, which doesn't actually exist, right? So this is just some examples and some ideas of things that you can do. But the importance is, the key importance is, first, to meditate on what your shadow is. Know what you're struggling with. And you can indicate that through fear, you can indicate that through sadness, you can indicate that through anger, you can indicate that through discomfort, by the feelings in your body, by the feelings in your mind, by observing how you react to different situations. Do you get uncomfortable? Do your palms sweat? Do you get antsy? Do you want to stand up? Do you want to walk around? Right? These are all indicators of things that are within your shadow. Then write them down. Articulate them. I am afraid of this. I would speak in the past tense as if you've already gotten over it, but I have been afraid of this. I have struggled with this. I have done these things. And then write them down, and then be able to, dropping my stuff, and then be able to come up with scenarios and situations, and write down those scenarios and situations to say, I know that I have been able to overcome this shadow aspect of myself because this event or situation or circumstances happened. And then what you're going to be able to do is, you're going to be able to refine the overcoming of that shadow. You're going to be able to say, okay, I am currently overcoming this. And maybe that the problem can be very deep. And so maybe that one scenario is not enough for you to have completely been able to integrate that part of the shadow. So maybe you can continue to work on that angle, for example. So going with the idea of selling, maybe the fear of rejection wouldn't be resolved if that person had said that thing to you. So maybe if you've actually had somebody say that thing to you and you're still feeling that fear of rejection, say, okay, well, maybe this scenario didn't exactly play out in the way that I would think it would play out. So let's think of another way, another scenario in which I know that I'm getting progress in my shadow of that specific aspect. I mean, clearly, it's progress. If that specific scenario happens, that is the measurable result of you progressing towards your shadow, that's great. But that might not be the final push that finally gets you over it, that finally makes you overcome that. So the last step that I haven't mentioned yet, but this is very important, and this is, how do you know that you have finally overcome that aspect of the shadow? And from my understanding of that is that you, from the things that I personally have found to be helpful on my journey, is you are able to talk about it very comfortably. You don't get weird. You feel a deep sense of peace about it. You feel confident and almost even authoritative in a way, to where you can talk about overcoming that struggle. You can essentially think about it without feeling fear. You can talk about it without feeling fear. Essentially, you can talk about any one of these topics without feeling fear of rejection, feeling uncomfortable, feeling afraid. You can integrate that in your life and act like it's a normal everyday thing in your life, and you don't even think twice about it. Like when you talk about what you did today. Oh, I went to the store and I bought some meat or whatever, and such and such and so and so, and I've struggled with this in the past. I've struggled with this relationships in the past, but it's okay. I'm overcoming it. It becomes very normal. It becomes very natural. It doesn't feel like a dark secret. It doesn't feel like something that you're afraid to talk about. It's not taboo. It's just normal for you. And the more normal it becomes for you, the more normal other people feel it is. So you becoming comfortable with the shadow makes everybody else's collective shadows easier to overcome. If you're talking about very scary things that people don't like to talk about, and clearly you are okay with talking about it, and you feel comfortable talking about that aspect about yourself that was in your shadow, people will be like, wow, like that is really, I see that person talking about those aspects of the shadow that I'm struggling with myself. And you can be that light and that guide for other people to say, oh, okay, that person really has been able to overcome that difficult part of their life. I'm going to follow their example. And it's going to be this snowball effect to where you can be that light of that person, where you've taken that light and shined it on that aspect of your shadow, and now it's not scary anymore. Now it's not part of your shadow. And this is immensely beneficial exercise to do in your life, because whether you like it or not, your shadow is still going to exist. It's just a matter of you properly and safely integrating it into your life. There could be a very unsafe way of integrating your shadow into your life. Like, I would hope that some of our viewers wouldn't think that, oh, the way to integrate my shadow in my life in fear of death is to kill somebody. It's like, no, like that's not the way that you integrate the shadow. There are healthier and safer ways in which you can integrate your shadow without going over the edge of it. And so I hope you guys are smart enough and aware enough to know when the boundaries are and to know when the limitations are. So I hope that was beneficial to you, and I hope that was insightful to you. I want to end off this video with, you have infinite self-worth. I love you guys. If you want to support the apparel company, my apparel company, Simple Truths Apparel, the links are in the description below. And 10% of all the annual proceeds go to an organization called MAPS, which stands for Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And they're doing some amazing research in the healing benefits of plant medicine. And personally for me, plant medicine has been transformative in my life. And in future episodes, I'm going to talk about how psilocybin mushrooms has been immensely transformative for me. So thank you guys for watching the video, and I hope that you found this impactful and insightful. I love all of you. Thank you.